Aside from broadcasting sound, television, simply consists of taking pictures and sending those pictures out over the air at the same time.
The character of Ruby Sunrise is fictional, but has a firm historical basis in the life of inventor Philo T. Farnsworth. In 2007, I spoke with historian Phil Savaneck, who has produced numerous documentaries about television's history, about the life of this extraordinary but still relatively unknown pioneer.
The story of Philo Farnsworth, which is roughly Ruby's story, sort of adapted, is one of the most amazing American ingenuity stories ever. You have to imagine a 14-year-old boy. He goes to the attic of this farmhouse they've just moved into, and he finds old radio magazines. There is no running water. There is no telephone. There is no indoor electricity or plumbing. So he reads these electronic radio magazines by a kerosene lamp at night, and during the day he's plowing a field. And the horse goes from one end of the field to the other and then turns around and comes back. At 14, he suddenly jumps up and says, I bet I could train electrons to send pictures through the air doing the same thing this horse is doing. Kind of like reading a book. You go from one side back to the other. This idea he had for sending electronic television pretty much came, he wasn't even a freshman in high school. So when he got to high school and he wanted to take chemistry and he wanted to take all these advanced classes, they wouldn't let him in. So he drew this diagram for one of his teachers, how he envisioned electronic television would work. And the teacher said, well, I don't understand this.
One of Farnsworth's earliest influences was none other than Albert Einstein, according to Farnsworth's widow Pem, in an interview with the Archive of American Television in 1996.
At that time, Einstein's theory of relativity was just getting a lot of negative publicity. A leading scientist in this country said, it's not true. It's on false ground. Philo didn't know that it wasn't right. It sounded real good to him. Mm-hmm. So he committed this to memory, and it was his approach that he got around a lot of the preconceived ideas that allowed him to get where he went. Einstein said that he did his inventions and his really productive work when he was a youth, and it took him the rest of his life to teach it to people. So he was really about as excited to talk to Phil as Phil was to talk to him. They never met except over the telephone. Professor Einstein made him promise to formalize his math and publish it. Well, this was harder to do than, as Phil said, Einstein took the rest of his life to do this.
Well, Elma Farnsworth, who was known as Pem, could in a way be construed like the character in the radio play. She really was the mother of television. She was the first person ever to appear on television. He needed someone to point the camera at. She did all of his technical drawings of the tubes and the configurations and everything.
She was working in the lab with him. She was close to him the entire time. And I also think she's the one that really tried to keep the memory of him alive and really tried to make sure that he was considered the inventor of electronic television in the history books, because otherwise it's very possible that it could have been erased.
It's dependable, so dependable, as dependable as can be. That's why every year more people buy
RCA Victor
than any other TV
for dependability.
Farnsworth developed a number of inventions critical to TV's development in the 1920s. But according to Savaneck, Farnsworth ran afoul of RCA because he refused to sell them his patents.
Basically, RCA did not have the idea of how to make a television camera. The receiver and broadcasting, all that, they were very good at. But the idea for the image dissector was really Farnsworth. A light goes from one side to the other and back and defines whatever image it sees. That was this 14-year-old's idea. He filed a patent in the 20s, and when RCA decided that they couldn't buy the patent, they decided to steal it. And they sent this man, Vladimir Zworykin, to Farnsworth's lab under the guise of being an investor or a comrade in the discovery of this new medium. And then that night, Zworykin sent back a 1,000-word telegram describing everything he saw.
And this was something that was so outside of the realm of RCA.
Karen Herman is the director of the archive at the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences.
They wanted to own all of the technology, all of the patents. So for them to have to pay to use another technology that they needed so badly was really something that hurt them deeply and was so incredibly rare.
So when Zworyk and RCA filed their patents, Farnsworth sued, saying this is a violation of mine, and it went to court. RCA feeling, we have a team of lawyers on call all the time, we'll just crush this guy. So he faces this giant RCA legal department. And that's when his high school teacher comes up with this drawing. And he wins the case, which means that every television sold, he will get a royalty on his tubes.
Farnsworth made money from RCA and his work flourished. But what happened to derail his career?
German forces invade Poland, plunging the nations of Europe into a Second World War.
And what that meant was all of the television factories and technology were closed down and taken over by the government.
One of the things that is sort of left to the wayside is that at about the same time, in around 1939, he's the one that introduced the baby incubator to the world.
But by the time the war was over and everybody refitted for commercial and civilian uses of electronics, his patents had expired. Now RCA didn't have to pay him anything. So he went in partnership with Capehart and Philco and a few others, and he struggled for a while, but basically he was crushed. And his children say that later in life they weren't allowed to have a television even in their house.
If you're still watching television on a small screen set, you're missing a lot.
Look here. Instant power tuning, just a touch to change channels. And complete wireless remote director, too.
The technology grew so rapidly that there were other ways also to use the technology, so the patent didn't necessarily apply. 17 years later, you were talking about color television now, you were talking about other types of ways to broadcast, so that also plays into it.
Farnsworth found himself forgotten and ultimately penniless.
He appeared on To Tell the Truth or one of those game shows. Nobody knew who he was.
Was he a victim of big business, or was his vision of the new medium's potential too limited?
I think it's one from column A and one from column B in a way, because sort of like Ruby Sunrise, he didn't see the programming that we have today. He really was about making the world a better place, about how could you have a war on television and, in the home, and anyone saying that this was acceptable. So I think that was a big part of it, is that he, unlike RCA and David Sarnoff, who was the founder of RCA, he didn't have that vision of the programming and entertaining and making it something that everybody would want in their homes in that sense.
I think there are still Ruby Sunrises and Philo T. Farnsworths out there. Young people with lots of vision and lots of energy. They're working on the internet.
Who knows what the future holds? It's fun guessing, though.
That's Phil Savaneck, a TV historian and documentary producer, and Karen Herman, director of the archive at the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. To hear more of our conversation, visit our website, latw.org.